May we please take our seats? May we please take our seats? Because we are about to begin with our afternoon program. We are going to start. Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to, I think this is our first press conference for 2023. So good afternoon, and our sincerest apology that we are starting a bit behind time. It is on the back of events that are not under our control. Esteemed PC Professor Dr. Mushinde Kashiwa, in your respective capacity as Ombarao Shitambi and Deputy Leader of our Joint Restorative Justice Movement, esteemed Gaup Hanse, Acting Chairperson of the Nama Traditional Leaders Association, esteemed members of the Ovaherero Chief Council, esteemed members of the Nama Gauku present here, distinguished Ovaherero and Nama leaders in your various formations, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. As communicated at various platforms and avenues, our struggle is just. It is one that is anchored in truth and right as a question of morality, but also right as a question of legal entitlement. It is a struggle that is for the long haul. It is a struggle. It is one that our people are at and one that our people will remain at until real justice is achieved. Accordingly, our struggle is multi-pronged. It is one that is emerged in the normal everyday conversations that we are having between and amongst ourselves, but importantly, conversations that we are having with our leaders, the national leaders, wherein we've been trying to talk some sense to them and practically beg them to change their ways and hear our cries. It is a struggle that is also fought in courthouses, as we did spend the last decade fighting in, amongst other places, courthouses in the US. And of course, we see that this decade has also begun with us now fighting for the same things in the courthouses on the local front. Ladies and gentlemen, what brings us here this afternoon, and as I said, is a multi-pronged struggle. It is fought in everyday conversations, it is fought in courtrooms, but it is also fought in us speaking to the world and telling them about our cries. Today, our cries to the world through the United Nations, a body founded in the ashes of the Second World War, to usher in a new era of peace and mutual cooperation, harmony amongst people, but really peace that is brought to the world through mutual understanding, cooperation, respect. Today, our cries, our voices to the world, they are beginning to echo, and the world is beginning to hear us. And through educated voices of the United Nations, the world is told that ours is a just struggle. It is one that is right, and the two governments, one of Germany and one of Namibia, must do right by our rights because they are in entitlement, and that our demands for reparations must really be heard. So that is what brings us here this afternoon. Our two leaders, the esteemed paramount chief of Ovaherero people, Professor Dr. Kashiwa, who is the deputy leader of our Joint Restorative Justice Movement. He will come to the podium and he will speak for all of us. He will tell you what the UN rapporteurs, many of them, about 8 or so of them, have actually communicated to the two governments in terms of affirming the rights of Herero and Nama people, but also reminding them of the violations that they stand in of those rights of the two groupings. So he would speak to that about that. But before I call him, I would have the honor of calling Gaup Hanse, who is the acting chairperson of the Nama Traditional Leaders Association, standing in for Gaup Isaac, who couldn't be here with us because of bereavement period that his people are going through following the fall of his deputy Gaup Stephanos Goliath. So before PC Kashiwa comes, we will hear first from Gaup Hanse, who would speak in Nama, but of course would be interpreted to us so that we can all follow the proceedings. Thank you very much. Can we hear from Gaup Hanse?
Iya, ada nyuri. Ada kan dimiri ni dia yang halubaci kain cekang ay dimiri. Tidak ke Gaup David Hansen. Kali NTLa isti nagang wa ingwa. Kamris di cucu ay di hadakan kwa ujing ay kesi ang kwan waha anay kai iya sada namada cihiri roda ay diding tuisam narigam tuara je nama kau kudi tuim na khasibahu kadi ngagurung na yang koi kami ije nari statements tamaskai ko bangkris juens sahuda huwa sa kali parman chifi khanirati khabela je kaise kai tui huwa ali in aira ia kali niri I kamkris kha tajesi ki chang khaira naran huwa si Turu sedang kais nani kas ki, cinimis ki, sarage ngaing hanwa uang. Nabi biar ida asi, sara tawa hui, ngai, ait sama, kobabasansa. Sarage ngaing hanwa uang, lingwarasa nambi apna. Sada tau huida, sada tau kuminira dihikrisa. Sada ye ngaing hanuba kali uang. Sada tau kumida ni ngorasa nambi apna. Sada tau huia mika kasa. Cije kasi yang kabasa. Ni kamtuis di swab aida. Monahun ada tahu kisah. Monahun ini ialah tadilah tahu je. Ayat sama dalira. Nidi kuat kalau budi. Nah, walas kisah. Nasi tulis ialah tanah sini yang kamu kisah. Ayat sama dah. Nama si hero kita asih. Nidi kuat kalau dalira. Walas kisah. Naus kami tahu sih. Niri kamtumis nira angkai cikamu tumis asi sisi muikas sida mana wai rahui asi tu sisi muikas habis ni kerja kamu tumi je hawa cina tahu sini nira sisi muikas anda nira nauski ni kalau tujuh kalau je tadi kalau ia miba ai nadi tai nadi hai cingari ai kalau baju uai jadi kam aira kam twistiba chi ne why hana ne justice tu sa chi gen ai dit man kaisa oskin na san hanu duma chi ge kaisi da kaisi si na ha di cha di ya ira ni tam ai ra chi kao ga thadira di cha ne khais ni ran an kais na UN ko se sara di a sa gi siu chi sara di kaisin di gi siu chi ra gi ne ching ngai sa se ari ko ban tuisens ne tam hanu kan wagus UN se karim ko ban tuisen asa ata basin chiang chau basin timi nama kauda ase ada naman tua miri tidak tuiba mari turu da ya nama chituen ge nau na ratri ngai abe da kirang nau ai mai ngai kwen kha ne khunna dara shishin tauba musin ha amaga khain a amaga nau ara mara chi khara ga nga go khun khara aida tuis nas thandan khun aida scheme tin to sa oni bada ye tui to ma ni bada gira nama herero to idamiri ni bada gira nama da chi herera asida ye ni ba sida tin anuga naba taba chi da gira tomta hanuk nambe active nira ni khaisen nam a khaisen Chira tan id mahamda ida sida china nata wanthar gusti basi ibada swara type mas ibada kain type mas khabe norasa nambi apna ida ko sida china na itu ba uang ai chima ko baba san kasa timi khaire ida ne khamsa tuiba ma se khamri khaire ida tui ko baba namara chere da ase ne kamsa tui ko bapna ko bantiri ora ge nauchi ha gu dide tira ge nauchi tui ba ma si na daga khuna nira ora gu gaswa as thari nin house ko kha khairi as thari nin house ko kha tai ba ri di kuda miri si nista no worry ka phansip asi kai kan kans
Thank you. I will just try to summarize. I will not go word by word. First of all, he is David Hanser, GAUP, and he is the deputy chairperson of NTLa. The chairperson is Johannes Isaac, and unfortunately could not be with us today because they are still in the mourning period as per the customary law of our tribe. Basically, what the GAUP said was, we are in an independent democratic Namibia, and with that there comes the human right as per the constitution, which gives the right to speech, which gives the rights for your own representation, and which gives you the right to also be, in terms of the democratic value, move around, go around where you want to be. Basically, he's talk about the genocide, that it is a very sad part of our history, and it's a historical fact. The Nama and Ovaherero, based on the request to the UN Special Rapporteurs, requested three things. One, self-representation, to speak for themselves and to negotiate direct to Germany, the killers of our forefathers. Secondly, that genocide should be recognized, not as per the terms of the joint declaration by the German government only in today's terms, but genocide in terms of when it happens. That is the second thing that both the Ovaherero and the Nama chiefs requested. The third thing was, once the genocide is recognized, there must be reparations, not development aid as per the joint declaration. At the end, he talked to the Nama nation to come together in this fight and to stand together and call on all Namas to come behind their leaders and then move forward and in unity. That the fight for genocide, first we are talking about Namas and the rest follow. There is no talk about church, there is no talk about political party here. We are talking about the fight for the Namas and the Hereros in terms of genocide. And then he blessed the occasions with the words of our Lord. Thank you.
Thank you, my boss, for interpreting Galbanse to us. And now, as we said earlier, about 7 or so rapporteurs of the UN, and these are informed, these are specialists in the areas, in the various areas that they looked at around our struggle, reparation, culture, and so many things. That is what the PC will read to us, what they have communicated to the two governments. And these are informed and educated voices of the UN, not those voices that will come from countries because they are friendly with who and who, you know, that corruption of politics. These are objective voices of people who have studied the matter, looked at the evidence, also followed the conduct of the two governments and our exclusion in the matter. So that is what they had relayed back, and that is what PC Prof. Dr. Kashima would be speaking to us about. Prof, the floor is yours.
Please, you may be seated. Yes, good afternoon. My honorable esteemed leaders of the traditional authorities, from the Nama Traditional Leaders Association, headed by my senior Gaup Hanse, and my senior and father from the Afrikaner communities. Also the chiefs of the Herero Traditional Authorities, Ringaite and Wadukwani Rukambe, and of course the rest of the technical members. Okay, there's my Chete chiefs, Chief Yeya. Thanks for being here with us. And the media, you're all welcome to this afternoon's event. Of course, also the members of the Namas and Herero traditional communities and fellow Namibians. Today, it's a special day that the fights that we have been fighting since early days of independence have received a voice that is echoing our calls at an international level. So this press conference is primarily called to inform you that the United Nations Special Rapporteurs have confirmed that the participation rights of the Hereros and Nama people have been violated by the German and the Namibian governments in terms of the international law during the interstate negotiations that has led to the joint declaration earlier, May 2021, and that the UN rapporteurs have sent a communication to urge the German government to pay reparation and also to urge the Namibian government to stick to the international law. However, before I expand on the content of the communications from the UN Special Rapporteurs to the two governments, it is only befitting that I give you a vote of gratitude to those who have participated in last weekend's events at Shark Island when we commemorated the genocide, remembrance and reparations walk last weekend at Shark Island. The genocide, reparation and remembrance walk was a historic in every sense of the word. It is the first time since Namibia's independence that the children of the victims of genocide that was committed during the German colonial era gathered specifically at Shark Island as Hereros and Nama people and as Namibians and as citizens of the world. What is also historic about the event is that for the first time, the Namas and Herero peoples, through their legitimate leaders, have erected a remembrance tombstone in honor of the fallen victims, our ancestors at Shark Island concentration camp, the death camp as it was known. Ever since the dawn of Namibia's independence, we have witnessed public symbols of remembrance of the ruling party of SWAPO, showing the SWAPO liberation struggle. Never has it occurred to the governing SWAPO party that anti-colonial resistance existed even before the birth of the SWAPO party itself. For the last 33 years in post-independent Namibia, attempts have been made not only in terms of the erasure of the horrific crime of genocide, which took place on current-day Namibian soil. Rather, very calculated attempts have also been made to erase the story of Shark Island by creating a tourism campsite which never reflects the history of the island. Since the dawn of independence, our Namibian government has consistently narrated Namibian history from the perspective of SWAPO, which was only formed in 1960 as only a last chapter of a campaign to self-governance that began many generations before the idea of SWAPO was even thought. Consequently, of this approach, whatever happened in terms of colonial history in Namibia before the formation of SWAPO has been erased in all forms from public remembrance. Namibia has become so obsessed with pretending as if colonial resistance started with the formation of SWAPO, such that Namibians have started to believe in this dishonesty that is fed to them by the official narrative. A so-called hero's burial shrine at the outskirts of Windhoek was specifically birthed to advance this SWAPO narrative, proclaiming itself as the sole liberator. To date, lost where I was. To date, outside the empty graves decorated with the names of towering figures of our early resistance, like Hendrik Witbooi, Hofea Kutako, and others not meaningfully honored elsewhere, largely only caters of the SWAPO later efforts of the 1960s are honored with burials on that side, so as to proclaim the sole heroes of our liberation struggle. The past weekend of Shark Island remembrance was in many ways about rejection of that twisting of history, and as such marked the determination of Nama and the Herero people to celebrate and honor the heroes and heroines of not only Shark Island concentration camp, but the broad and long journey of our people to this day, wherein they still seek justice for historical crimes meted against them. It is also marked by determination to never forget that we, the survivors of one of the most horrific crimes committed in history here at home and elsewhere in the world, without any official government assistance, the Herero and Nama people have shown their resilience and determination to claim their right to exist as a people. As leaders of the Nama and Herero nations, the NTLa and OTA would therefore like to thank each and everyone who participated in the resounding success of last weekend. We particularly take note of the conspicuous absence of any official Namibian or German government representation at the event. We also take note of the absence of any official representation of members of the Forum of German-speaking Namibians, although formal invitations were sent to the following. To the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Honorable Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah. To the Regional Governor of the Karas region, Honorable Governor Aleta Friedrich, in her capacity as Regional Representative of the Head of State. To the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany in Namibia, His Excellency Mr. Herbert Beck. Also to the Chairperson of the Forum for German-speaking Namibians, Mr. Harold Hecht. All these invitations, all these invitees stayed away from the event without a word. Nonetheless, our resilience has endured. The Nama and Waherero people rose up in numbers from Botswana, South Africa, United States of America, Canada, United Kingdom, but also continental Europe, and of course, from across the breadth and width of our country, Namibia, to pay homage to our ancestors. The German-based civil society organizations who have been in solidarity with us over the years joined our mourning and celebration of life. A special word of gratitude goes to them, to the entire German Solidarity Network, who made it possible to raise funding that enabled us to hold this event. I will not name them here by names, as there are too many, because they have always been with us as trusted friends. We have never stood back when the call for duty or assistance has been put to them. A great word of thanks to them. I shall now return to the core business of this press conference. As the chairperson, as the director of ceremony, Nandi Mavengo, have just said, earlier this year, NTLa and OTA, through their legal representative, reached out to the international community and put our case to the United Nations Special Rapporteurs to question the lawfulness of the conduct of the Namibian and German governments in the interstate negotiations between the two governments on the matter of 1904 to 1908 genocide and the subsequent joint declaration that was announced in May 2021 by the two governments. What we are presenting to you below is the outcome of that effort. In short, I would want as a take-home message to you that the special rapporteurs in all aspects are agreeing to our position that we have stood for over the past 30 years. So on Monday this week, 24th April, several United Nations special rapporteurs published their joint communication to the German and Namibian governments on the violations of international law during the interstate negotiations on reparation for colonial crimes and by the joint declaration. They confirm that participation rights of Herero and Nama pupils have been violated during the interstate negotiations. That has led to that joint declaration and urge the German government to grant reparations. So that is a clear recognition of the genocide committed, and there is an urge that they must pay reparations to the Hereros and Namas. So the special rapporteur's letter to the governments and their subsequent communication. So I read. So on the 3rd of February this year, the special rapporteur, now I list to you the various 7 rapporteurs that combined this communication to the two governments. And this communication was sent on the 3rd of February this year. So the special rapporteur on the promotion of truth, justice, reparation and guarantees or non-occurrence, Fabian Salvioli. That's the first one. The second one, special rapporteur in the field of cultural rights, Alexandra Kautaki. The third one, Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Summary or Arbitrary Execution, Morris Tadbol Bins. The fourth one, the Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing as a component of the rights to an adequate standard of living and on the rights to non-discrimination in the context of genocide. Bala Krishnan Raja Gospal. Is the fourth or fifth now, the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Francisco Kale Tsaye. The Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Violence, KP Ashwini. And the Special Rapporteur on the Violence Against Women and Girls and its causes and consequences, Rim Al-Salem. They jointly wrote one letter to the German government and one letter to the Namibian government, in which they expressed their grave concerns regarding the violation of international law. Both governments had 60 days to respond, during which the communication stayed confidential. On 12 April, the German government asked for an extension of the deadline until May 8th this year, arguing that answering the legal questions required the cooperation of several ministries and that these would take a longer time. The Namibian government, however, did not respond at all. Thus basically ignored the directive from the 7 UN Special Rapporteurs. So that's the matter with the Namibian government. I move forward on the legal obligation to actively seek effective participation of affected communities, including those in the diasporas. So this is the subject. On that one, the Special Rapporteurs had the following. One of the main legal issues the Special Rapporteurs raised is the lack of effective participation of Herero and Nama during the German-Namibian interstate negotiations between 2015 and 2021, leading to the joint declaration initialed in May 2021. They state clearly that their direct and meaningful participation through self-elected representative was not a matter of political discretion of the two governments, but is guaranteed by international law and enshrined, for instance, in Article 11 and Article 18 of the United Nations Declarations of Indigenous Peoples' Rights. They also made it clear, the rapporteurs, that the invitation to an advisory technical committee by our government that does not allow for direct participation cannot be construed as a refusal to participate by affected communities. All these points have been raised by the Namibian government and German government in an attempt to divert public attention from their legal accountability and to urge that the whole process belongs to a political sphere of foreign policy and thus entail broad political discretion. Remember very well that our government here was saying they represent, is an elected government. The president was elected by that time by 87%, and therefore the Namibian people has given them the right to negotiate on this issue of reparation. That decision does not lie with them. It's not their. This matter is not a political issue to be decided at a political level. There are international laws that guarantees the participation of indigenous people whose rights are violated, like in this case the Namas and the Hereros. So the change of names from reconciliation agreement to joint declaration and political declaration is just one more such examples of diverting attention. Furthermore, the German executives seeks to delegate its own legal obligation to ensure active participation of the victims in terms of international law to the Namibian executive. Sort of trying to delegate that to the Namibian executives, saying whoever the Namibian executive brings to the table, it's fine. It is the obligation from the German government to ensure that they live up to the legal obligation to actively involve members or elected leaders or appointed representatives of the victim communities. The German government argues that nation states are the primary actors in international order and that it is bound to negotiate with the Namibian government executive as the sole legitimate representative of all Namibians. Therefore, it argues that they trust that the Namibian executive has ensured that those participation rights are respected, that they formally acknowledge and aim to implement. So it's just assume if what the Namibian government says is fine, and they don't bother that those rights are respected. The special rapporteurs made it clear that this reasoning is incorrect and that both governments have legal obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill participation rights. Lastly, the special rapporteurs make an important clarification regarding the moment when the governments are to seek the active participation by the affected communities, including those in the diaspora. They affirm that the participation rights apply not only during negotiations, but already before, when transitional justice mechanisms are being designed, and later when the agreed measures are being implemented. So we should have been long way before in crafting the modus operandi in engaging either the Germans for negotiations. We as victims, not just governments inviting us at the last minute or inviting a few chiefs and says that's a forum of chiefs and they're only consulting that. I move to the question of legal recognition, reparation and reconciliation. The special rapporteurs said the following: they urge the German government to assume legal responsibility for the colonial crimes committed during colonial rule and to grant reparations. Legal responsibility. And we remember we have always said this issue of reparation is a legal issue. The two governments are saying they will deal it politically and call it reconciliation or reconstruction agreement, trying to avoid legal responsibility. So responsibility, and therefore I demand an obligation on the German government to pay reparations. They made it clear that the joint declaration initialed in 2021 does not contain effective reparative measures and does not provide the necessary means to achieve reconciliation. They affirm that according to international standards, reparation should aim to comprehensively addressing the multiple consequences and effects of harm suffered, including as a result of killing, starvation, torture, gender violence, forced labor, or loss of property, and should entail measures in the areas of restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, and satisfaction. So it's a broad range of issues that need to be included. So the joint declaration is no way close to these issues. So the rapporteurs basically are rejecting the joint declaration as a means to achieve restorative justice. In 2021 already, Fabian Savioli, one of the rapporteurs, said that any negotiations on reparation for colonial crimes had to take into account lessons learned from transitional justice processes over the past 40 years. In addition to the lack of direct and meaningful participation of affected communities, the special rapporteurs criticized the strict secrecy agreed upon between the two states regarding their negotiations. So the secrecy is rejected. They emphasize that this kind of top-down approach is incapable of providing a sustainable basis for peaceful future, as experience from other transitional justice process show. Furthermore, they criticize the substitution of reparation by development aid. The rapporteurs criticize the substitution of reparation by development aid. They confirm that the provision of development aid to address the legacy of colonialism risks perpetuating rather than rectifying colonial dynamics, where the one who provides aid controls what the aid should be used for, controls when that aid will be given, how much it will be given. Reparation is another issue. It's an obligation to pay. It's not charity like development aid. So I move to what we also observe in Namibia, and the special rapporteurs have noticed that the insufficient memorialization of Ovaherero and Nama genocide. Insufficient memorialization of Ovaherero and Nama genocide in Namibia. The special rapporteurs express concern that the reported insufficient memorialization in Namibia about the genocide against Ovaherero and Nama peoples, including sexual violence experienced by women and girls. They further emphasize that comprehensive memorialization measures should be adopted in full consultation with victims of genocide. So it's not a question of placing a few photos on one of the floor in that is it Sem Nujoma statue and claim that that represents our wishes. So we should be fully engaged and design what we think is appropriate to memorialize the genocide against the Hereros and Namas. Yes. Again, you can see this absence from the obligations that either our government has to memorialize genocide. It is clearly shown by the absence from any of our commemorations of the genocide events that we had over the last 33 years. Reproduction of colonial racism and decolonization of the doctrine of international law as the theme. Under that theme, the special rapporteurs also raise that reproduction of colonial racism by current interpretation of the doctrine of intertemporal law by the German government, according to which the laws at the time did not protect the Ovaherero and Nama by killing them in large numbers. To bring home this point, remember when we were in the New York case, Germany argued that they had nothing wrong to the Hereros and Namas because Hereros and Namas at the time were not part of the international law. We were regarded as savages, as wild tribes. It is that intertemporal doctrine, or the doctrine of intertemporal law that Germany tries to prescribe, that is further emphasizing racism and need to be decolonized. So the rapporteurs, reiterate that this interpretation of the doctrine of intertemporal law is an obstacle to reparations, and that German government should refrain from interpreting it in that way. Already in 2021, the UN Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and racial intolerance, then Tendai Achiume affirmed in her report on human rights obligations of member states in relation to reparations for racial discrimination rooted in slavery and colonialism, that the pursuit and achievement of reparation for slavery and colonialism requires a genuine decolonization of the doctrine of international law, and that remains barriers to reparation. She explicitly referred to the principle of intertemporal law. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, let there be no doubt on the part of the German and Namibian government that we leave nothing, no single stone unturned in our quest for restorative justice. This is merely the beginning of a campaign to lay bare the machinations of the German government and its neo-colonial lackey, the Namibian government. We shall never accept that sellout document called the Joint Declaration that negates our rights and betrays the blood of our ancestors. We are clear and we remain clear ever since that nothing about us without us. Thank you. I think if there are questions, we will answer questions. But in short, the international community is with us on this matter. And their report is very befitting, is very aligned, supports the legal case that we've instituted in the High Court by taking the government to court. It is in line and very supportive of that move. Thank you.
Thank you, PC. Thank you. And there we have it. So that is the communication of the 7 rapporteurs to the 2 governments. And that has basically just amplified our message, a message that we have been preaching for the last 30 years, that as victims of a genocide, we are entitled to reparations, nothing else. And when Germany engages us, it must engage us within a framework already set by the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and the Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Those things are already there. So that is the message that, again, they reminded the government of Germany about, that the demand for reparation is just, and they must heed it. The Namibian government, of course, also the rapporteur, just to add to what PC said, they were, in fact, the rapporteurs actually expressed regret that the rapporteurs actually, that Namibia withdrew from its earlier position, which was one of a mere facilitator to one of a chief negotiator. You know, because that space is not for the Namibian government, it's for the victims themselves. It's for us to define our justice. So this was just an amplification of what we've been saying, that self-representation is a right. We cannot just be mere attachés to processes and procedures that are established elsewhere without our involvement. So basically, it's a press conference. We are now open for questions from the media, or most importantly. But that, in a nutshell, is really what the UN rapporteurs have said, that our rights of participation has been violated, and that needs to be corrected. And it is a shame that the Namibian government had an opportunity. Often here at home, they have been telling us about all these processes wherein we were apparently involved, or we declared declined involvement, but because they know that those processes are not meritorious, they did not use that as an argument in replying to the UN. They had no answers. They knew that they took a position which is inherently not theirs. And so they retreated in shame, I must say. So it's a press conference. We are open for questions. Or any high table. Do we also want to add, to say anything? It looks like PC and the rapporteurs, which is the message that he brought, they were very clear. There are no questions. So as far as we are concerned, the process that was envisaged under the 2006 genocide motion, that process for us has not begun. What has gone on for all these years is a process that, for all intents and purposes, the rapporteurs are saying it's illegal, it is of no standing, because it was not done with our involvement, it was not done within the context of the UN framework that is set for litigating such matters. And so this is where we are at. Germany must do right. Our leadership, the legitimate leadership of our people stands here. They stand ready to engage with Germany. Of course, that motion defines a role for the Namibian government, and that is one of the facilitator. And so it is our counsel that that is the role to which they must confine themselves. So I'll go 1, 2, 3. Oh, there's a question. Can we have somebody to take in the mic? Nandi is only a facilitator. Speak to the house, not to Nandi. You are not audible.
Oh, now you can hear.
My name is
Muye. I'm a freelance journalist.
Can you use this?
Rhetoric as I could sound, I would love to hear from the PC. What is the significance of this report, of this feedback, and what is the way forward from here? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we go? Can I have somebody who's taking the mic?
My question, it's not a question. I want our leaders to look into that thing that I'm saying now. We are at Shark Island and there was a campsite there. For me, it is a holy place. I want our chiefs to please do and everything in their power so that we can, what you call it, that thing, they must never have a campsite there. It's a holy ground for us. So please, my leaders, do that for us.
Okay, thank you very much for these strong words, and I think it's a good sign to have the report. I wonder how you prepare for the 8th of March when the German government should officially reply, knowing maybe also that the 8th of May is when German fascism capitulated to the Allies, so this was officially the end of World War II, so it's... Germany and fascism? I just said that the 8th of May is also a special day because this was when German fascism capitulated, when World War II officially ended.
Thank you. We have, I think, 2 questions. The other one is really just a plea to our leaders that camping on our sacred ground at Shaka Island must be put an end to.
Thank you. Chiefs, all the representatives of Nama of Wairero and etc. I just want to make a comment. I don't like a term of privilege. Around the Nama of Wairero genocide, there is no anything like privilege. It is a right of us, whether we like it or not. Because Namibian government denied us so many years our basic fundamental right to be part and parcel of what is being done around us. In Namibia, who is here to pay tax and rate? To who? Who is the owner of the land? We must ask these governments, both whether if it is still government of former German colonial governments land or whose land is it? Because Namibian government, when they come as a government, they have been supported more than 30 years before that by Germany. And still today it is the same story. So we must not forget it is our fundamental right when it is come to an issue of a land. Thank you very much.
Okay, maybe I could allow PC at the high table to speak to the issues that were raised. The first one really, PC, has to do with the significance of the moment. Your people, the 2 people, have been at the struggle for a very long time. We have arrived at this moment where it seems the world is now listening and echoing your voices. What does it mean for us?
Thank you. The significance of these letters to the 2 governments, it is now, I know it already in 1985, there was a report of the UN that determined already that it was a genocide that the Germans have committed against the Hereros and Namas. So the UN is aware about that. But this latest involvement of 7 special rapporteurs of the United Nations, it's a milestone in our campaign for reparation. Because these rapporteurs in their respective 7 areas of expertise, they have analyzed what Germany and Namibia are supposed to do and what they are doing, wrongly. And they then propose or express clearly what the 2 governments must do. They lay emphasis on the international law, the UN conventions that are already in place, that the 2 governments have agreed to or ratified. In fact, in the letters to each of the governments, there is an appendix or annex in which they clearly state that you have signed this one, you have acceded to this law. Why are you breaking it? Why are you not doing according to the law? Now, this rapporteur's reports goes to the General Assembly, it goes to the Secretary General, to the whole system of the UN. All governments will be made aware of this report, because now these reports, as we speak, they are available online. Everybody globally who's following this case are reading it. For us as Hereros and Namas, this is nothing different from what Jose Akutako has started in the 1940s with the petitions to the UN. It took time from 40s to 1990 to get independence, but it has placed Namibia at the time at the international level, and so our demands were discussed at UN levels through the 7th Committee. So in this case, our demands for reparations is now placed within the hands of the UN. We will continue to go back to them to ensure that Germany live up to the obligations of the global nations, the United Nations in this case. So I think it's not I think, but it's a huge and a significant achievement. That is why you see that after 60 days, the two governments have not answered. The one has asked for an extension to see what they can do. Our government here is basically numb. I don't know which way to go. In fact, it may be seen as an undiplomatic gesture not to respond by deadline, not even to give an excuse to say, look, we are working on something, but just to stay away from a response. So that again illustrates how these governments take this issue of reparation. In fact, the one point that the rapporteurs are raising, that look, Namibian government, why are you not creating sufficient memory spaces of genocide in Namibia? While they are being asked this, they are staying away from an event of commemorating the lives and massacres of our people at Shark Island. So I think it's very significant progress that we have made. And also the significance of this. We have a case in court. We have a case in court. The rapporteur's report or letters highlights exactly the materials that we have highlighted in court, in the court papers, where the two governments have deviated from international law and practice. So that again it puts the framework very tightly within which our government can move. So we're pushing them into a corner that they have very little space to maneuver. The second issue of extension. The extension really is not the date, how far they extended by 2 weeks is not an issue. It's fine, they will still have to submit something. They are obliged to submit something. They would have to. By not doing it is an embarrassment. So they will submit their report and maybe try to refute a few things here and there. But after submitting that report or their response, the UN special rapporteurs will summarize the findings of what that report says, what Germany says, whether it was true or in line with international law. So I think at the end of the day we'll have a template that will use to galvanize international support, to put more pressure to bear on the two governments in the end for us to fully participate in the negotiations. As is now, the joint declaration, the negotiations that have taken place is basically rejected by the 7 rapporteurs. So we have to start afresh as we have always been campaigning for. I think that's plus minus all. Thank you.
Thank you, PC. Thank you. And I think before we go to another round, just to make sure the campsite, that it must stop, that practice must stop. I think the leaders had you, the camping on that sacred ground, we must have a serious push to make sure that those who desecrate and host party events on our gravesite, that practice is actually ceased with. There was the push for land, ancestral land, the return of our land is really what sat at the heart of our struggle. Our leaders had that sentiment. That land is really part of the parcel of our struggle, and it must never be left behind. It is still an outstanding question of our struggle. And again, to you, Julia, just to build on what PC have said, you said end of this month is when Germany apparently will submit. In the case of Herero, Germany have had 119 years since they committed this crime. In the case of Namas, it's 118 years. So again, they had 60 days. They are asking for extensions. We know that they have no any other recourse than to do right. The law has been written, they were part of the law, and in fact when they committed the crimes in 1904, there were already laws that forbade them from engaging in the acts that they did. The Berlin Conference Agreement, for instance, did not allow them to do that. They were supposed to look after the natives, under that framework. The Namibian government, of course, we are not surprised why they did not respond. They have always been followers. Germany did not respond. Maybe they are waiting for Germany's response so that they can copy and paste. That's what they do. Yeah. So we are going for another round of questions. If we have none, we have just returned from Shark Island. Our leaders are really very exhausted. I think at this point, with the concurrence of the high table, I would say the conference is adjourned. Thank you very much for coming. Good afternoon.